Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. A new literature review in the International Journal Advances in Dairy Research examines 20 years worth of canola meal studies in dairy rations. The preview summarizes information on canola meal's palatability, nutrient composition, including its protein and amino acid value, fatty acid composition, and micronutrient profile. It also covers results from feeding studies comparing canola meal to other vegetable proteins. Joining us to walk us through that review are Dr. Essi Evans with E&E Technical Advisory Services and Brittany Wood, Director of Canola Utilization with the Canola Council of Canada. Welcome to you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Thanks for having us.
For those of you that are joining us, we thank you for taking the time to tune in. If you have any questions, feel free to post them there in the chat area to the right of your screen. If you're joining us from social media, simply post your questions directly in those channels. So Brittany, let's start with you. What should producers and nutritionists know about canola meal? Give us some background, if you would, please.
Sure. Okay, so canola meal is a very commonly used protein ingredient, especially here in North America. Canola is grown extensively in Canada and parts of the United States as well. We process canola. A lot of that does happen in Canada. And then canola meal is available for use in livestock species, really here in North America and in other countries as well. We see a lot of that canola meal that we produce going into the dairy industry specifically. So quite often when we're talking about canola meal, we think about dairy cows first because, just based off of the review that we're talking about here today, there is a lot of research that really supports canola meal as a very good protein source for dairy cows. But it's universal. You can feed it to any livestock species. It has about 36% crude protein. It is very palatable. So we know that various species, dairy included, are going to eat. Their dry matter intake levels are going to remain high when they have canola meal in the diet. In this literature review that we're talking about today, a lot of the literature actually shows when cows are fed canola meal, they'll eat even more. So often we see feed intake is going up as a result. So this is just a point. Sometimes, depending where you are in the world, you'll hear canola and you'll also perhaps hear rapeseed or double O canola or double O rapeseed. And so sometimes that can be a little bit confusing because the products can be a bit different. But in canola that's produced in the United States, produced in Canada, we know that it has very low levels of anti-nutritional components. Specifically, the word is glucosinolates, which is that bitter taste. So it's very low in canola and resulting in canola meal. And so that's why we see palatability is, universally across the board, very well received protein ingredient for livestock, specifically for dairy. I think if I could just add one more point before we, I think, maybe dive into that lit review a little bit more, I think I'd also just highlight that what we've known about canola meal for a period of time now is that milk production actually goes up when cows are fed canola meal. So there's quite an extensive body of research now that shows every time we feed canola meal versus another protein ingredient, cows are responding by producing more milk. So, everyone loves that, right? It means that there's an efficiency there, that the animals are taking the nutrients from canola meal and putting it into milk production, which is exactly what we want to see.
More milk is always a good thing. That's for sure. So Essi, tell us about the literature review that was done in Advances in Dairy Research and why was it created? How did it come together? Give us some background, if you would.
Okay, well, Brittany and I have been working a lot with, the scientist group that we deal with. And also trying to translate some of what they're doing and get it out. And two reasons that we found we really needed to put something in a publication was, first, we wanted to be able to provide people with very accurate values for the ingredient. And we've done some survey work and we've come up with absolutely, rock solid data. And that's important because, as Brittany mentioned, canola is a fairly new ingredient and it has some unique properties, but it was developed from rapeseed meal. So in a lot of the databases that are available, people are using values that came from rapeseed meal, and those are not particularly accurate, and they are very difficult to have somebody work out a ration when they're not using the proper ingredient database. So we wanted to have that right. And second, we wanted to let people know what to expect when you're feeding it. Again, in the past, there are differences between canola meal and rapeseed meal. And Brittany mentioned palatability as one. So how much can you feed before you see any issues? We found basically that there are none, but that's not the same for rapeseed. So we wanted to be able to look at that and provide people with feeding results from actual feeding trials. So that's why we basically limited our data to findings from the last 20 years worth of research.
So then who would benefit from reading the review? Who should look at that?
I would say, Sarah, probably two groups, feed formulators for sure, and those that are feeding it or want to purchase it. Because of that, we sort of divided the manuscript into two sections. The first, we have the in-depth composition, and the second section was a compilation of feeding trial results. And anyone formulating the diets need to be comfortable knowing that they have reliable data. So that's one group. And second, when people are purchasing ingredients, they need to have an awareness of how that'll work with maybe the ingredients they have on farm, the different types of forages, what levels of inclusion, and they can go through the review and see the different types of trials that were conducted and feel comfortable when they're using the meal.
So Brittany, what in your opinion, then, what were the most surprising findings in the research that you evaluated?
Yeah, so there's some new findings that we've been looking at, and some of this comes from research that's done out of the USDA Wisconsin-Madison Dairy Forage Research Center. And it wasn't expected. So when you feed canola meal, cows are producing more milk, and these were mid-lactation cows. But the trial was lengthy, and that actually allowed the researchers to see what is the rate of decline of that, the milk curve that the cow has, and the rate of decline, or the persistency, the ability of the cow to produce more milk for a longer period of time. And they actually found that the cows on the canola meal treatment were having that rate of decline of milk production was less when they were feeding canola meal. So, the canola meal fed cows were producing more milk for a longer period of time. So that was really kind of interesting. I think we've got more to learn there. So, we'll have to keep an eye on that one.
Essi, talk us through some of the key findings and what your thoughts were.
Okay, well, first, there was a lot of research that was conducted on basically a commodity ingredient. And I think the really important findings we have are the quality of the protein and its amino acid profile. And what really came out of this is that some of our newer methods of protein analysis that have been developed point out that the rumen undegraded protein fraction is quite high for canola meal. And we can now also fairly accurately estimate total tract digestibility of the protein. So we've identified the protein, and we can confidently help people determine the level that they need. But also the amino acid profile of the rumen undegraded protein fraction is pretty close to what's required for milk. It's closer to microbial protein, rumen microbial protein, than other vegetable proteins. There have been several meta-analyses that have been conducted using the results from the canola meal studies, and they've basically shown that the efficiency of protein use is very high for canola. And without these new tests, this doesn't really make sense. But when you put the two together, you can see that, okay, there really is a lot of RUP going through, and the amino acid profile is useful, and that's why we're seeing this high efficiency. So diets can basically be formulated with lower protein, and you don't need to use as much energy to eliminate the unusable amino acids. The other point I'd like to make is cows in early lactation. We really didn't have a lot of trials, but within the last few years, there have been some, and those, I guess, point out again what Brittany mentioned about palatability. We're seeing higher intakes in early lactation, and I think that's been a benefit as well. So we've reviewed that.
Sounds like you guys have learned quite a bit in doing this extensive review. So what else would you say, Brittany? Anything else that producers and nutritionists would learn from reading the review and all the work you've done?
Sure. Yeah, there's lots of different points. Just thinking maybe a little bit practically, sometimes we get questions about the fat content within canola meal, and nutritionists or producers perhaps just wanting to make sure that that is going to be well suited for the dairy cow. So one thing we know about canola is that it does sometimes have a slightly higher amount of total fat in canola meal than we see in some other similar ingredients. But the fatty acid profile is really what's important to consider. And so canola oil, that oil fraction within the meal, has a high amount of oleic acid. And we know that oleic acid is a fatty acid that is pretty inert in the rumen, and so we don't have any concerns with, say, milk fat depression from that fat composition within canola meal. So that's an important thing to highlight. The other thing, canola meal is also a good source of phosphorus, and it's available to the cow, as the cow has the ability to get at phosphorus that's perhaps found in phytate as well. So I would say those are two additional kind of practical points to share about the review.
So Essi, there also was you also looked at canola meal and greenhouse gas emissions. What did you find there?
Yeah, this is a really new research area. We were lucky to be able to work with some really good scientists and get some new findings. And basically what we found is that when we use canola meal as a replacement for soybean meal in diets that were essentially the same except for the exchange of the protein sources, that we saw a reduction in methane production and nitrous oxide production. So when we look at the studies with a replacement on an equal protein basis, we find that less methane gas is produced per pound of milk with canola compared to soybean meal. Now, methane represents a loss of energy. So if less is produced, then in theory, more should be available for the cow. And that's helping us somewhat to be able to explain some of the things that we were unable to explain about feed efficiency. So that's useful. The new trials also looked at the efficiency of protein use, and with lower MUN values, lower urea output in urine, the benefit of that is that there's less conversion of urine nitrogen into ammonia and then nitrous oxide. So that's where the nitrous oxide part comes into play.
Interesting. So I'm going to have a question for both of you here, and it's basically anything else you'd like to add. Brittany, I'll start with you.
So I'll just comment a little bit on canola meal availability, because I think that anyone who's formulating diets might find this point of interest. So in Canada, the canola processing industry is actually set to go through a pretty big expansion. So starting probably in 2024, and onwards for the next few years, we're going to see Canada producing more canola meal, which means there'll be more canola meal available for markets like the dairy industry. So just something to kind of keep on your radar, as all the kind of good points we know about canola meal are going to make it that much more of an accessible ingredient.
Yeah, always good to know if it's going to be available or not to put in those rations. So Essi, anything else that you would like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, as kind of a research nut, I'm real happy to know that the research is going to continue. And I think what we've learned is that we need to run trials for a longer period of time so that we gain information, like Brittany was discussing on persistency. And that I think the fallout of that is that we'll learn more about how the meal's used, and I think we can hone in a little bit better on, some of how the post-ruminal nutrient values should be applied. So I see that as a good thing.
Very good. And we have posted for you all a link to the journal, to the review, so you can certainly take the time and check that out in great detail. Brittany, where else can producers learn more about canola meal? I bet you have some ideas for them.
Yeah, so actually in that link, it does take you to the Canola Amazing webpage. So that's a bit of a long thing to say, but Canola Amazing, so kind of all in one word, if you put that into Google, you'll get to the Canola Amazing website. You can also get there through the Canola Council of Canada website. And we do, as good of a job as we can of making sure that we're posting new research onto that website. Of course, the article is available there as well. And you can find us on LinkedIn as well. Sometimes we're posting some information there too.
Very good. Our thanks to Dr. Essi Evans and Brittany Woods for your time today. Thank you both, ladies.
Thank you very much.
We also appreciate all of you that have joined us here today. We appreciate you taking the time and tuning in to listen. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 segments are available at feedstuffs.com. Simply go to the 365 button in the nav bar and you can view our upcoming sessions as well as all of our on-demand sessions. Tomorrow on Feedstuffs 365, we're going to be talking with folks involved in the Transform Initiative, and that's a group that's working to bring together the poultry industry around a set of antimicrobial stewardship use principles with the aim of reducing antimicrobial resistance. To date, they have a 30% of the global broiler industry on board, and we'll be hearing from several of those organizations and why they believe the initiative is important to the industries in their respective countries. So a real global look, and that will be at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on Feedstuffs 365. Until next time, for Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.